We are going to talk today about what can we diagnose using iridology. So what we're really doing here is talking a lot about the scope of practice as iridologists. All right, so if you've been with me for any length of time, you will know that I've got two missions in my business. The first one is to mentor practitioners who are struggling in their businesses because they spend their own time unpaid and after hours creating client programs. And the second one is to teach the truth about iridology and its proper application in wellness practice. This is so important. With that in mind, let's dive into today's topic. And that topic is, what can we diagnose with iridology? Now, we need to first understand what the word diagnose means. Diagnose means to name a disease process, right? To say you have this disease name. And so what I'm going to say to you right off the top is that we go to a doctor or a naturopath and they'll run tests and they'll analyze the results. And from those results, from your symptoms, they will come up with the names of a disease. And then they will create the treatment protocol from that disease name. Now, that's not a bad thing, and we're grateful when they do that and when they do it well. We just need to remember that current statistics, based on a report from the British Medical Journal, Volume 22, Issue Supplement Number 2, showed that based on autopsies, 20% of all medical diagnoses are incorrect. And that's with the benefit of all of the lab tests they have. So maybe as iridologists, maybe we don't want to name diseases. We've all heard of cases where once a disease label is attached, it's very hard to remove. And the treating something by disease label is a very common course of action. So I want to actually maybe consider changing the question from what can we diagnose using iridology to what value does iridology have in assessing client needs and creating wellness programs. And so I want to look at several case studies, and I want to show you the markings that I saw in their eyes, talk about their history, and in doing that, I will explain to you how the markings influence the programs we created. Does that sound like a good approach to take today? If that's something you're interested in hearing, give me a thumbs up. And we've got Dr. Paulos from Brazil. Thank you. Good to see you from Brazil. And Desiree is saying, yeah, let's do this. All right. Excellent. Let's start with this one. We're going to look at probably 5 or 6 specific cases today. These are the eyes of a 10-year-old boy who had come to me with a diagnosis of ADD-ADHD. The parents were wanting to try to avoid putting him on medication, and they were looking for holistic alternatives. And so, as we're talking, we talked about diet. We'll touch on that a little bit here as well. But what I noticed first off is this boy has these amazing contraction furrows. Oops, I did not mean to do that. Just let me get that image back. There we go. Amazing contraction furrows and radial furrows. That instantly puts this young man into the category that we call anxiety tetanic. What we know about people who are anxiety tetanic is they always like to be busy and they function in the sympathetic nervous system. Now, what I want you to remember as we look at these photos is that everybody who has contraction furrows and radial furrows does not have ADD-ADHD. And there may be cases of ADD-ADHD where we do not see contraction furrows and radial furrows. In my practice, the vast majority of people who come to see me with any kind of an attention deficit issue or a hyperactivity issue do have contraction furrows and radial furrows. But again, that's not enough to say, well, you've got ADD or ADHD. It does again suggest that because this person functions in their sympathetic nervous system a lot, they're always waiting for the next crisis. They're waiting for the next shoe to drop, the next bad news to come in, everything. And what that means is they don't filter stimuli very well. What that means is that for a child in a classroom, someone dropping a pencil, a fly going by, a siren outside, every little thing that is a noise does not get filtered. Every little noise is an instant distraction that needs his attention. And so when we recognize this about children who have ADD and ADHD, we need to think why. What is it that gives us the ability to filter? And much of what gives us the ability to filter is the function of our adrenal glands. Our adrenal glands produce many of our stress coping hormones. When we are anxiety tetanic, as this young man is, we know that he burns through his B vitamins, vitamin C, calcium, and magnesium very, very quickly. We also know that his blood sugars need to stay balanced. If his blood sugars are not nice and steady, he's going to be more prone to dropping into a sympathetic response, because the only reason for your blood sugars to drop is a bear is chasing you, and that's burning up all your sugars, right? And so as we look at this, we need to then ask many questions like, what is your diet like? Tell me about your sleep patterns. How do you handle anxiety or frustration or stress coming from different areas? And what is your favorite learning method? Now, when we see someone who's anxiety tetanic, they are probably very kinesthetic learners. They probably learn through their body. So putting them in a desk and telling them to sit down and be quiet and look at the chalkboard or the whiteboard is probably not the best learning mode. Giving him some manipulatives, even a piece of paper and a pen just to draw, giving him some stretchy things to play with, keeps his body busy and actually frees his mind to pay attention. All right. So when this person needs to make sure that what he does is always physical. He's not going to make a good accountant, but he'd make a really good landscaper, right? He'd make a really good site inspector. He'd make a really good ecologist who's out in the forest, hiking and doing animal studies and things like that, but probably not going to be really good at sitting still. And so we need to tailor his educational needs to that. But we also then need to look at diet, right? So I asked, what is your diet like? And mom and dad both came to his appointments, which was lovely. And they said, well, breakfast is cold cereal. Well, most cold cereal is sugar laden and not very good. What's in your lunch? Well, lunch is packed. He eats his lunch at school and he takes his lunch. So it was often, ham and cheese on white bread with like a fruit roll up and a drinking box, not a juice box, but the Kool-Aid kind of boxes. And there'd often be cookies or something like that. And then, well, what's for supper? Well, it's usually pretty rushed and we've got a busy life as a family. So it's usually pasta and a chunk of meat. Okay, that's not going to help. None of that is going to help one little bit. So what we did with this young man, without saying he has ADD, ADHD, we were just simply looking at how do we sustain him and support him so that he can pay attention better, so that he doesn't get so wiggly and distracted, so that he's not always disturbing his neighbor. First thing was balance his blood sugars. So we suggested that his breakfast needed to contain protein. I wondered, could they switch to a multigrain bread, preferably a sprouted multigrain bread, and maybe do French toast in the morning? And instead of using pancake syrup, use just a little bit of maple syrup with some cinnamon sprinkled on it and some butter, some real butter, not margarine. Could they do an omelet and a piece of whole grain toast? Like 2-egg omelet with veggies and cheese and things in it. And they agreed they could do that. We talked about his lunch. What could you do in lunch? Well, we could swap out the bread for a sprouted grain bread. That's going to increase our protein by maybe a couple of grams. It's better than nothing. Could we replace the juice box with just some water? Yeah, we could do that. Great, that's good. Could we replace the fruit roll-ups or the fake fruit, things like that, with actual fruit, like some cut up fruit. Yep, that would work. Could we replace the cookies with something else that would be a little bit healthier? Like, could we find a really good tasting and healthy ingredients protein bar, and even just do a half of one of those, because protein bars are pretty dense for nutrition, right? And so they said, yeah, we could do that. So they did that. We talked about supper. Now, supper was going to affect the whole family. We really needed the whole family on board. So we talked about the importance of protein, the importance of getting some leafy greens, the importance of getting a couple of different kinds of vegetables. We talked about what are the family's favorite vegetables, their favorite proteins. Are there casseroles they could make ahead that would save time, to do some batch preparation on the weekend? Could they batch prep some vegetables that could be used in a casserole one night and in a stir fry the next night? And things like that. So we came up with some strategies for the evening meal. And then, yes, we did do some supplements. We used some liquid methylated B vitamins with this young man. And we used some liquid calcium magnesium with him as well. When he came back a month later, his parents said the teachers were noticing a significant difference. And they were very, very pleased with the progress he was making. And so that was how we began his program. We actually worked with him for many more sessions and got some lovely progress. But that was how we did it. We didn't have to give a disease name. We simply needed to understand what his symptoms were and what the markings in his eyes were, put that together to ask appropriate questions to understand what direction we needed to take. How does that fit for you? Does that make sense? Does that sound like something you could use in your professional practice? Give me a thumbs up if it made sense, and 2 thumbs up if it's something you could use in your professional practice. Desiree, thank you for that. Let's look at the next one. For those of you on Instagram, I will move my camera closer because you're getting a lot of, and Desiree is saying, got to get to the root. Oh, you do have to get to the root. And that's the problem with the medications, is they hide the root. This is a female client. She came to me at the age of 26. Oh, I love those hearts. Thanks, Instagram. She came to me at the age of 26, newly married, wanting to be pregnant. She had gained about 60 pounds in the year leading up to her wedding, which is like, oh my flippin' heck, that's amazing. And she wasn't quite sure what to do with this. And thanks, Mazturi Bashiri, I hope I said that right, that it's something you can use in your professional practice. Amazing. So when this young woman came to me wanting to get pregnant, she gained all that weight. And she had been to her doctor, who had done some testing and determined that she had PCOS. Her menstrual cycles were getting further apart. Okay, and she has the weight gain. She has lots of closed lacunae in her eyes. Some of them are even attached to the collarette. We've got a few in this one that are attached to the collarette, which suggests she may be at a greater risk for having metabolic imbalances. Right, the diagnosis of PCOS suggests that she's insulin resistant, right? Insulin resistance goes hand in hand with PCOS. Her diet was terrible. I mean, probably one of the worst I've ever seen. Lots of rich, refined foods. And so we needed to really work with that. Now, as we covered diet with her, she did an amazing job. I've never seen anyone stick to a diet more closely. She eliminated all the refined carbs. She increased her fat intake and her protein intake and only used very complex carbs. She increased her vegetable intake like nobody's business. And as a result, she lost those 60 pounds in 6 months, took off 10 pounds a month, did not feel starved at all, and actually got active. She started working out to do obstacle courses, which is a pretty intense training. And so what we found with her is, as we got her blood sugars balanced because of correcting her diet, and as she got physically active, her menstrual cycles improved. They came down to a typical 28 to 30 days. And she actually went on to have 4 children without medical assistance. She did not need any intervention from the medical world. She just needed to clean up her diet. So again, she had polycystic ovarian syndrome. We're going to look at another case of PCOS, and I want you to notice how different this eye is. You see that these eyes don't look anything alike at all, like not even a tiny bit. That is why we look for markers to help us understand what's going on, right? So important. This is Kelly, an Asian woman in her late 30s. She and her husband came to me. They'd been trying for 3 years to get pregnant with no luck. They'd been to the fertility clinic. The fertility clinic just said, well, you know, your cycles are 90 days apart. You just have to use metformin and Clomid. That's all we can do for you. There was no dietary advice whatsoever. And so as we come back here, what we see, and Lillian, I will come back to your question as soon as we finish this case. I'll come back to your question about the previous case. So what we've got here is nothing that suggests overtly that she should be PCOS. But what we do see is that she has lots of contraction furrows and lots of radial furrows. Now, do you remember from the little boy what that means? It means she burns through her B vitamins, vitamin C, calcium, and magnesium very, very quickly. Okay, it means that she internalizes her stress very deeply, that she responds to everything as if it's a world crisis. And so we looked at her diet. Again, it was really, really bad. And we looked at her line of work, which is an accountant and has a lot of stress, particularly at quarter end and year end and month end. And so as we're looking at this and looking at her cycles being 90 days apart and looking at the medical diagnosis of PCOS, we knew instantly that she was probably type 2 diabetic. So I asked her, did the doctor say anything about type 2 diabetes? Absolutely. They said, I've got type 2 diabetes. And that was why they'd recommended metformin. And so we got right to work. We again used a methylated prenatal vitamin with her, and we cleaned up her diet. Like, she was having a sweet roll of juice for breakfast, and lunch was Asian food, Chinese food with sweet sauces on it, and supper was a repeat of lunch. She had no exercise. Her favorite exercise was watching her husband play soccer. Okay, no exercise whatsoever. So we completely redid her diet, and her husband's gem of a man, he did all the food prep. He ate exactly what she ate, so that this was a real team effort. And he was so excited about the results he got for his health, even though he was not type 2 diabetic. What we saw was very rapidly, it took about 3 or 4 months for her cycles to come down from 90 days to 35 days. Now, it did take her 18 months from start to finish to conceive, but she did conceive. She did not develop gestational diabetes. She was told she would. She did not. You know, she was eating properly to balance her blood sugar. She was working out, exercising every day. We just had her walking. That's all we had her do, was walk for 30 minutes a day, sometimes twice a day. And she did very, very well. She delivered a baby at full term, a beautiful baby boy, a 7-pound baby boy, in a 3-hour labor and delivery. She's a tiny woman. To pop a baby out in 3 hours was quite remarkable. So really, really pleased. And again, we went that way because we could see that she doesn't handle her B vitamins very well. We knew the diet was a mess. We knew that she didn't handle her B vitamins well, and her calcium and magnesium and vitamin C. So we addressed those very fundamental root causes, and we were able to bring her into balance. So Lillian on Facebook is asking about the supplements for the little boy that had the contraction furrows and radial furrows, the anxiety tetanic type. And again, it was simply B vitamins, vitamin C, calcium, and magnesium. Again, hopefully you've got the nutrition training under your belt to understand that different people need those in different formats. And it's not just We throw a generic B vitamin at everybody. Desiree says, iridology saved my life. I'm so grateful to the iridologist I met a long time ago. Would love to be able to help others. Ooh, I like that, Desiree. You and I need to have a conversation. Okay, now that we've done a few case studies, I would like to introduce myself formally, and then we'll do some more case studies. All right, by you? Some of you know me, you've been hanging out with me for a while. Some of you are brand new to me. So let's hop in and do a quick intro. I got into holistic healing over 4 decades ago because I had health problems that the medical world was not answering for me. They weren't ruling anything out. They weren't ruling anything in. They were giving me no direction whatsoever. And so when the opportunity came for me to begin learning this, I was actually in university to be an elementary school teacher, but I met a young man who was handsome and charming and funny and smart. I'm only slightly biased. And he knew a little bit about herbs and nutrition and iridology and reflexology. And he started teaching me what he knew. And that was the turning point. I took everything he taught me. I married him. And I ran with it. And I have not looked back. I have enjoyed every minute of this. In my over 4 decades in this industry, I've written and self-published and self-distributed many books. They're all out of print right now. They're all due for an update. Pregnancy Naturally, the Herbal Birth Kit Handbook, Healthy Kids Naturally, The Essential Guide to Nature's Sunshine Products, Biokinesiology and Color Therapy, Levels 1 and 2, and the Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology textbook. That's the only one that's not out of print, that last one, and it is available only to students in my course. I've also created and taught many courses. I've taught Herbology Level 1, which was 20 hours of practical herb usage. And this was way back 35 years ago when we didn't have the internet, or the internet was just in its infancy. You might remember the old dial-up, and it was all text. There were no graphics or images. Really, it's come a long way. Students in that course loved it so much that they wanted more. So we put together a 16-hour advanced course which was designed to help them understand why herbs are used in combination. And when you look at labels and you see different herbs in there, how do you know what you can use that for beyond what the front of the label says if you're buying it pre-made? And so biokinesiology and color therapy level 1 and 2, more courses I designed. For a while, I was a certified prenatal educator. So I designed and taught prenatal classes. And I have designed and do currently teach the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System, which is an IPA approved iridology course. It covers all of the level 1 and level 2 core curriculum. So if you're interested in learning more about iridology and about the course, stay with me to the very end. We have a course starting up in April. This screen that you're looking at now is one that I am very, very proud of. I am an IPA level 3 certified instructor. Level 3 is a level they just introduced in July. I am one of only 3 level 3 certified instructors in the world. There are 3 others who were grandfathered in because they took the course. But for those of us who actually had to take the course, do the exam, I am only one of 3. So I'm very, very proud of that. Liliana is asking, what kind of magnesium do I recommend? I choose the magnesium based on the client. And so I can't always get exactly what I want, the best option based on my suppliers. And so I choose the best that's available for that particular client. Alrighty, so here we go. And she's also asking, do I like the Nature Sunshine Liquid Calcium? Not particularly. I have from one of my, from a company that makes herbal blends for me, I actually have a calcium-rich extract that I prefer if I'm doing it for children, right? And my issue with the Nature Sunshine Liquid Calcium is the balance. I don't like the calcium to magnesium balance in it for most of my clients. I'm also a proud member of the Canadian Association of Holistic Nutrition Professionals. of the Canadian Association of Natural Nutritional Professionals and of the Alberta Herbalist Association. On all of these, I'm a professional member, which means I've had to show my credentials and maintain my credentials in order to be a part of these organizations. The next course start date for Dynamic Iridology is April 21st. And again, if you are a health professional, could be a herbalist, nutrition coach, a naturopath, a chiropractor, a medical doctor, an RN, and you're interested in learning iridology to use with your clients or your patients, stay tuned because I got an invitation for you. Liliana, the one that I use is a private label, and so it's a recipe that I made, so it's actually not available for sale on the open market. Let's look at some more cases, shall we? Look at some more eyes. Sound like fun? This is another young woman who came to me at the age of 20. I've only seen her once because she came to me when she came home for winter break from university, age 20. And her concern was that as a 20-year-old, she had gained about 20 pounds in the past year and was not happy about this. I don't know many 20-year-olds who want to gain 20 pounds, 20-year-old women especially. So we asked about her diet, and very high carbohydrate, university eating on the campus meal plan, which is not necessarily the best food in town. I asked her about her lifestyle, no physical activity at all, just walking around on campus. She was going to school in Hawaii, so she didn't have a car, and she didn't do much walking. She just would go to classes and come home. I asked her about her menstrual cycles. Are they regular? She said, yes. I asked her, are they every 4 weeks? She said, well, they're 4 weeks late. And I went, so you're telling me you have a cycle every 2 months? Yes. Well, when you understand PCOS, what you know is the first definition, the first screening definition is the cycles average more than 45 days apart. They have fewer than 9 cycles per year. And she clearly did. And so she certainly wasn't trying to get pregnant, was not sexually active, did not want to get pregnant, but did want to lose the weight and wants to get pregnant in the future after she gets married. So we started with looking at her eyes, and what we saw, and this is a very fine marking right here, this fiber that comes around here is called the collarette. Right here, it is lifted right off the surface of the eye. This is called a gateway arch. And what's really interesting is when we look actually in her other eye, she's got 2 more in her other eye. This has a really strong correlation to an inherited issue with handling her carbohydrates. Now, you notice I did not say she has type 2 diabetes. I did not give her disease name. We simply talked about carbohydrates. And I asked, is there anybody else in the family who has carb issues that maybe has been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes or is gaining weight that they can't lose? And she couldn't think of anybody. And I said, well, this suggests that you might have issues with your carbs. So we started talking about diet, and it was a big question of what can you do with where you live? What facilities do you have available? Do you have access to a kitchen? Yep, there's a kitchen in my apartment. Great. Can you get to a grocery store? Yes, I can. How would you get there? I would walk. Brilliant. That's absolutely perfect on every level. Could you go to the grocery store twice a week? Yes, I could. How do you feel about buying and cooking protein? Chicken, maybe some beef, some eggs, maybe some fish. I can do that. Great. How do you feel about increasing your vegetable intake? Could you eat salad every day, like a big salad? Could you do green beans and zucchini and cauliflower and broccoli, things like that? Yes, I could. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So we created that program for her. Now, I didn't actually use any supplements with her. She's a university student going to university in another country on an island, no less. And I wasn't sure she could get the exact supplements I wanted her to have. Wasn't sure she could even afford them. So we decided to just stick with food. She emailed me about 8 weeks after starting the program and said she'd lost about 10 pounds. Her cycles were getting a bit shorter, like she'd already had 2 cycles She was between cycles when we met. So she'd had 2 cycles coming down in length. She was very, very happy with that. Did I say she had PCOS? No, I didn't. Did I say she had type 2 diabetes? No, I didn't. I don't need to name it to understand the chemistry of it. I want to address the chemistry of it. Her eyes told me what questions to ask. Her eyes also told me what to do. That's what happens when we use the eyes and when we use iridology properly. Now you'll notice I don't tell people you've got this problem and your eyes are going to change when we do this cleanse, because the eyes aren't going to change. The irides themselves are not going to change. All right. So, and I love that we've got questions coming in and I'm answering them as I'm able to. So if you've got more questions, please pop them in for me. This will be our last fertility case, and then we'll do another case or two. And Desiree is saying this is great. Oh, so glad you're enjoying it, Desiree. Alrighty, so this is Michelle. She came to me in her mid-30s trying to get pregnant. She'd been trying with her husband for a year with no success. And, you know, as I look at her eyes, I see she's got closed lacunae attached to the collarette in both eyes. So this is suggesting she is at risk for metabolic issues. Suggesting she's at risk. Doesn't say she's got them, but suggesting. She's also got a tiny marker that's almost impossible to see right here that tells me that she is probably MTHFR defect as well. Okay. And so her diet was excellent. Well, her diet was healthy, but it wasn't totally on target. That's a better way of putting it. Like everything was organic from scratch. So that's beautiful. That means there were no refined carbs. What was deficient is she wasn't getting enough protein. She wasn't getting enough fat. So we had to coach her through what would that look like? How would you incorporate more protein? How would you incorporate more fat? She tended to lean more towards being vegan. So I needed to help her with that and to give her more ideas of how to work with that and increase her protein. Again, she's got contraction furrows in both eyes. So I know she's going to need B vitamins and because of being MTHFR, she probably would need, because I thought she was MTHFR, she would probably need the methylated. So we used a methylated prenatal vitamin with her. And we did a lot of other things. We embellished her diet with more protein and fat. She got pregnant about 6 months after we started working together. Now, remember, she's got contraction furrows all over the place. They're not as prominent as some we've seen because she doesn't have all the different pigment in her eyes, but she has contraction furrows. And because of that, I knew we needed to make sure she was getting her B vitamins. I knew as our appointments progressed that she internalizes her stress. She absolutely lives in the sympathetic nervous system. The number of times I would get emails from her that were literally vibrating with anxiety, with questions she had, and I would have to talk her down and explain it and just really calm her, right? So halfway through her pregnancy, she did 23andMe. And it came back that she is MTHFR, right? And so that email literally almost exploded my computer. It was vibrating. Oh my goodness. And I was able to go back to her and say, I need you to do a couple of things here. First off, take a deep breath. I suspected this from our first appointment, which is why we're using these particular supplements with you. I've got your back. We've covered that track. Nothing to worry about. Now, your next piece of homework is, and she loves dancing and singing and reading stories to her unborn baby. I said, your next piece of homework is to go and dance with your baby, sing to your baby, and read stories to your baby, and start enjoying this pregnancy already. You know, we've got you halfway through. We're in a good place. Time to start enjoying. Now, remember, I couldn't tell from their eyes that they had PCOS. The other symptom this woman had that was really interesting was her menstrual flow was so light, she described it as being a smear on the tissue. Like she never even needed to use a mini pad or a panty liner. That also got my attention because did I suspect PCOS? Yes. MTHFR? Yes. And I also suspected just from that symptom that her estrogen was probably too low to make a uterine lining that was thick enough for an embryo to implant in. So we actually worked really hard on that, and we got her up to where she was actually having a flow, first time ever, where she actually needed a pad for 2 to 3 days. Right? We were so excited when that happened. Most women do not get excited to have periods. We got excited because now we were making progress in balancing out her body. So again, from here, we can't tell that she's got PCOS. This doesn't tell us that she has deficient estrogen or progesterone. But when I look at this and when I couple it with her symptoms and with what I know about the body from a deep study of anatomy and physiology, I can ask the right questions and we can create a strong program for her. And that's the beauty of iridology, is it teaches you the questions to ask, but you've got to know your A&P. You've got to have anatomy and physiology under your belt. A lot of people say, well, I've been studying on my own, and I'm going to say it's probably not enough. There's a course that I like to recommend to people. So if you are thinking, yeah, you could maybe use a real course, let me know and I'll send you the link. I don't even get commission for referring people to this course. It's just a course that I really believe in because I've seen the graduates, it turns out. So if you want the A&P link, let me know. All right, so this is a little bit of anatomy physiology for you for the next case, which is not a fertility case, just so you know. It's a man in his 50s. He'd been a client of mine for many years. And as my clients often do, we get them to a good place and then they disappear for a few years. They're in a good coasting place. And so they're doing what we've taught them. Things are holding well. But as they get older, their bodies shift and they develop new symptoms and then they come back. And I love that. I love that. So this fellow came to me with an SOO problem, sphincter of Oddi. Now let's talk about what that is. We've got the liver. The liver produces bile that it shunts down these little tubules into the gallbladder. When you eat something fatty, the gallbladder pushes the concentrated bile out through the common bile duct into the duodenum or duodenum, which is where the fats get emulsified. The dietary fats don't get broken down in the stomach at all. They get broken down in the small intestine. So Kevin's issue was that in those intervening years between our last appointment and the current appointment, he had run into some problems with his gallbladder and he'd had his gallbladder removed. Now we could talk about the emotions of the gallbladder and we know exactly why he developed gallstones and needed this removed. But as is so often the case, what happened is the doctors did not tell him what the possible risks afterwards were, right? And one of those risks is a sphincter of Oddi problem. The sphincter of Oddi is right here. It's what allows the contents of the common bile duct, which includes pancreatic juices and bile, to be released into the small intestine. Many, many times after a gallbladder removal, the sphincter of Oddi will get into problems. It will spasm, or it will develop scar tissue and start to constrict, which means that this person ends up in serious pain whenever they need to release bile. And if they don't release the bile, it backs up into the liver and through the liver can get into the blood, and they can actually end up with bile poisoning, which is very, very dangerous. Denise, I will absolutely send you the A&P link. Thank you for that. If you would PM me your email address, I'll shoot that to you when we're done, but do send it to me in a private message so that I can grab that from you. All right, so he came to me with sphincter of Oddi. Now, I didn't even know what sphincter of Oddi was, seriously. I had to look it up. Many people think they can see gallbladder problems in the eye. Well, you really can't necessarily. So this is his right eye. When we look at gallbladder, it would be sitting right here. And if we are seeing gallbladder, if we're seeing an inherited potential for a gallbladder problem, we would likely see a lacuna. If we're seeing an acquired issue that was genetically programmed, so something where his body was said at 52 years of age, that gallbladder is going to struggle, we would likely see a pigment sitting here. But we don't see either of those because in his case, the gallbladder issue was likely because of repressed anger. Okay. And so no indication here that gallbladder would be an issue. And so knowing that, and this picture was taken after the surgery, there is no marker here that says he's had surgery, because surgery on a body part does not show up in the eye, because the surgery is not genetic. The iris itself is genetic. Even the pigments we see are genetic. The fibers don't shift, they don't move. Pigment can build over time, again, giving us genetic cues as to what the body is going to be doing or is doing. And people say, well, how can that be? Well, yeah, my hair wasn't always gray. My hair's gone gray based on genetic cues, right? To a large extent, it's exactly what we're looking at here. So in the iris, there's no specific sphincter of Oddi point. And we don't see any indication here that there was a familial predisposition towards the gallbladder issue. And so we could not have predicted it from his eyes. Okay. So actually, after he had his gallbladder out and he came to me with a sphincter of Oddi issue, we looked at his eyes again with this image, we talked about his anger and the fact that he is a very nice, mild-mannered fellow. But his cost, the price of that is he swallows all of his anger and he holds it in and he never lets it out. And he's just nice to everybody all the time. And they never know that he is so angry with them that if he wasn't such a nice guy, he'd probably punch them in the face, right? They never know that he's angry. That's the gallbladder issue for him. So really important here that you remember that it really doesn't matter if you're a herbalist, a nutrition coach, or an aromatherapist, or a naturopath. If you want to learn, or a medical doctor or a registered nurse, we've got a lot of medical people who are shifting gears and going holistic. We need to really avoid labeling diseases when we do iridology. My pet peeves when I see things on social media with people naming diseases. Iridology is not a crystal ball. It's not a party game. It's an assessment tool. So again, the answer to the question, what can we diagnose with iridology? Nothing. Nothing. We can see inherited predispositions, which may or may not manifest as health problems, but we need to have a conversation with the client to match their symptoms up with what we see in the eyes. And you saw how we could use one marker to give us information about many different health conditions, right? And that's what this is all about. It's about understanding anatomy and physiology, understanding iridology, to understand how they integrate. Amy, it's good to see you. Thanks for saying so. That's so nice. She says, this is really great teaching, right? And so we use the eyes to help us assess, and then to help us understand, and to help us create holistic programs. So iridology is an assessment tool. It points the way to the questions we should ask. In doing that, and Lillian would like the link, and she'll, fabulous, she'll send me her email. Wonderful. When we look at this, again, looking at how do you learn this? How do you learn this? Because a lot of teachers teach this marking means this one thing. That's not going to be helpful if you're a holistic practitioner. Might be helpful if you want to do it as a party game, maybe, but it's probably going to be mostly wrong. That's exactly why I created the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System course. It is the only live, online, fully mentored course for nutritionists, herbalists, naturopaths, medical doctors, RNs, chiropractors who want to streamline their clinical work without sacrificing client care. so they can stop working unpaid overtime to develop client programs, so they can stop overwhelming their clients with undoable programs, and so they can create programs that will increase client compliance, which means the clients get results, client success, and long-term retention. Those of you who are practitioners already, does that sound like something you want? If that is something you want, give me an oh yeah. You know, if you want clients who can follow your programs because your programs are manageable, if you want your clients to be coming back to you for the long term, not necessarily once a month for the rest of their lives, but 4 or 5 appointments, then they go off and they work with that for a few years and they come back. I've got clients that have been with me for 39 years. And I've got many that have been with me for over 30 years because of working this way. The goal of the course is to teach you constitutional iridology and how to use it confidently so that you can easily integrate what you already know about nutrition, herbology, whatever your modalities are, to confidently create programs in your paid client sessions. We do not want to be doing homework on our own time that we are not going to get paid for, right? That's just not right. I don't know any other health professionals that do that. I don't know any other professionals who do that. You know, my physio charges me for every minute. My dentist charges me for every procedure, right? My accountant charges me for every minute. So why should I work for free as well, right? If I'm giving good value, I deserve to be paid, and so do you. The next course start date is April 21st. It runs 5 till 7 p.m. Mountain Time. And by then we'll be on daylight savings, Mountain Daylight Time. So just to be aware of that. Early registration is open, but you don't get to just register. You need to book a call. I need to have a conversation with you to make sure this is the right course for you. Do you need A&P before you do this? Desiree, I strongly suggest that you have A&P at least 3/4 of a course under your belt before you do this program, right? And I suggest that because if you don't know your A&P, the connections we make are not going to make sense. You need to know how the body works to understand iridology fully. And so I really encourage you to get the A&P under your belt. Otherwise, you're going to get lost. My experience, I used to let anybody into the course, and it was a little bit depressing. And I mean that personally, because people who didn't have the A&P under their belt would drop out. It was too hard. And so I really want you to have that knowledge of the A&P under your belt so you can be more successful. I know a lot of iridology instructors who will teach anyone and everyone. They'll also teach iridology in 2-3-day weekends. My course is taught over 20 weeks to give you time to practice and to give you time to study and to give you time to really understand it and begin integrating it so that by the end of our 20 weeks together, you've had so much class time and so much mentoring time that you feel much more confident. Okay, and that's really important to me. The other thing that's really important, and this is going to be the last piece of commercial, I promise, is that I only accept 10 students per course because I want to make sure that I have enough time to devote to my students in the course so that they are getting what they came for. Right? I want them to graduate from the course, certify or not. They can do the IPA certification if they want or not. I support them through that if that's what they desire. And some of my students do and some don't, and that's perfectly fine. But my goal is to have my students pass the certification test on the first exam, should they choose to do that, and to be really confident. I want them to be really solid and to know that they're well supported. All righty. So I think I've answered all of the questions that came through. Those of you who want the anatomy and physiology course link, make sure I get your information, and I will send you that link gladly. If you've already got anatomy and physiology under your belt and you think you've got enough, book a call. If you want to get into the next course, book a call. Let's have a conversation. Let's see if we both agree that this course is the right thing for you right now. Or is it maybe better to wait for a future start date when you've maybe got more A&P under your belt? All right. So my goal here is to make sure that you are in the right course at the right time for you to be successful. That makes sense? All right. Amazing. I have loved being here with you today. Thank you for your interaction. Thank you for your questions and your comments. I truly appreciate that. And I look forward to hopefully having phone calls with a few of you in the very near future. And certainly I will get the A&P link out to anybody who sends me their email address through private message or however you want, and we will make sure you get that. I look forward to speaking with you again soon. Make it a fabulous day. Bye for now.